My sister for your leftovers, says bald little girl to millionaire CEO. What he learns changes all dot. Where are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories can reach. Leave your comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming emotional stories that touch the soul. The March evening breeze carried the scent of grilled salmon across the upscale patio of Romano's, where 31-year-old Marcus Thompson sat alone at his usual corner table. As CEO of Tech Vision Solutions, he'd grown accustomed to dining alone, surrounded by the muted conversations of couples and families he envied but never joined. He pushed the remaining half of his expensive meal around his plate, his appetite lost in another day of empty boardroom victories. His Armani suit felt like armor against a world that demanded his success but offered little in return. The restaurant's warm lighting couldn't chase away the coldness that had settled in his chest years ago. "Excuse me, mister." Marcus looked up to find a small blonde girl, maybe 7 years old, standing beside his table. Her clothes were clean but warm, her sneakers held together with tape. In her thin arms, she cradled a baby who couldn't be more than a year old. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but children aren't allowed to," Marcus began, then stopped. The little girl's blue eyes held a desperation that made his chest tighten. "My name's Madison," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my baby sister Grace." She shifted the infant gently, and Marcus noticed how naturally she supported the child's head. "I've been watching you eat, and I have a deal for you." Marcus set down his fork, something in her serious tone demanding his attention. "What kind of deal?" Madison took a shaky breath. "You can have my sister for your leftovers." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Around them, the gentle clatter of silverware and murmur of conversations continued, but his world had suddenly narrowed to this impossible moment. "What did you just say?" "Grace is only 13 months old," Madison continued, her voice gaining strength. "She's really smart, and she hardly ever cries. She'll be better with you than with me. I can't take care of her anymore." Her bottom lip trembled, but she held his gaze. "All I want is whatever food you're not going to eat." Marcus stared at this child, who spoke like someone far older, offering the most precious thing in her world for scraps from his table. The baby Grace gurgled softly, her tiny hand grasping at Madison's worn sweater. "Where are your parents?" Marcus managed. Madison's facade cracked for just a moment. "Gone." The single word contained a universe of pain that Marcus recognized. He'd been 11 when his own parents died in a car accident, leaving him to navigate foster care and ultimately forge his own path to success. But he'd never faced anything like this. "Madison, I can't, please," she whispered, and now tears did fall. "I know you're rich. I've been watching people like you for weeks. You have nice clothes, and you order expensive food, and you barely eat half of it. Grace deserves better than what I can give her. She deserves someone who can buy her real food and warm clothes and maybe even toys." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, a wall he'd built around his heart suddenly developing fissures. This wasn't about charity or tax deductions or corporate responsibility. This was about a 7-year-old girl making an impossible choice out of love. He looked at Grace, who was studying him with curious dark eyes, and then back at Madison, whose courage in this moment humbled him completely. "Sit down," he said quietly. Madison remained standing, clutching Grace tighter. "Does that mean yes? You'll take her?" "It means sit down so we can talk." Marcus pulled out the chair across from him. "Both of you." Hesitantly, Madison settled into the expensive leather chair, adjusting Grace on her lap. The baby immediately reached for the shiny salt shaker, and Madison gently redirected her hands. "When did you last eat?" Marcus asked. "Yesterday morning," Madison said matter-of-factly. Grace had the last of the formula this morning. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He signaled the waiter, who approached with barely concealed disapproval. At the presence of the children, "Bring me another order of everything I just had," Marcus said firmly, "and a bottle of warm milk for the baby." "Sir, our policy is about to be overlooked," Marcus said, his CEO voice brooking no argument. Now, as the waiter retreated, Marcus studied the girls across from him. Madison kept one protective arm around Grace while trying to smooth her own tangled hair with her free hand. The baby was beautiful, with Madison's blonde curls and enormous brown eyes that seemed to take in everything. "Tell me about your parents," Marcus said gently. Madison's face shuddered. "Mom died 3 months ago. Cancer. Dad left when Grace was born." Her voice carried no emotion, as if she'd practiced delivering these facts without feeling them. 3 months? Marcus did quick math. Madison had been caring for Grace since she was 6 years old. The magnitude of that responsibility staggered him. "We lived with Mom in a shelter downtown," Madison continued. "After she died, they said I was too young to stay. They wanted to split us up, put Grace in a foster home and me somewhere else. So, you ran. I couldn't let them separate us." Madison's voice gained fierce determination. "Grace only knows me. I'm all she has." Marcus watched Madison naturally entertain Grace with napkin peekaboo, the baby giggling with delight. The love between them was evident in every gesture, every protective glance Madison cast around the restaurant. "How have you been surviving?" "I beg sometimes when Grace is sleeping. I find bottles and cans to return. Sometimes people give me food." Madison's matter-of-fact tone broke Marcus's heart. "But it's getting harder. Grace needs more now, and I can't always find formula." The food arrived, and Marcus watched Madison's eyes widen at the grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and bread. But instead of eating, she immediately began breaking the salmon into tiny pieces for Grace. "Madison, eat," Marcus said. "Grace first. There's enough for both of you." Still, Madison waited until Grace had eaten several bites before taking any food herself. When she finally tasted the salmon, her eyes closed in pure relief. Marcus had to look away from the gratitude in her expression. "You said you've been watching rich people," Marcus said. "How long have you been planning this?" Madison paused mid-bite. 2 weeks. I watched how different people treated waiters, how they looked at homeless people. You never looked disgusted or angry. You just looked sad." The observation hit Marcus unexpectedly. This child had been conducting reconnaissance, studying potential caregivers for her sister with the strategic mind of someone far older. "And you chose me because I looked sad?" "Sad people understand things," Madison said simply. "Happy people sometimes don't see what's really happening." Marcus realized this 7-year-old had just delivered the most insightful observation anyone had made to him in years. Grace had fallen asleep in Madison's arms, her tiny fist clutching the sleeve of her sister's sweater. The restaurant was quieter now, the dinner crowd thinning as evening settled over the city. "Where do you sleep?" Marcus asked. Madison glanced around nervously before answering. "There's a place under the downtown bridge. It's dry when it doesn't. Rain too hard." Marcus felt something twist in his stomach. "Madison, it's been raining for 3 days. I know." Her voice was small. "Grace caught a cold last week. I was so scared." She looked down at the sleeping baby. "That's when I knew I had to find her someone better." "You're 7 years old," Marcus said, more to himself than to her. "You should be in 2nd grade, worrying about spelling tests and playground drama." "I went to school before Mom got really sick," Madison said wistfully. "I liked reading time, and art class." Her expression darkened. But that was before. Marcus studied this extraordinary child who'd been forced to grow up far too fast. Madison had the vocabulary and reasoning skills of someone much older, but Occasionally, he caught glimpses of the little girl she should be allowed to be. "What's Grace's favorite thing?" he asked. Madison's face lit up. "She loves music. Sometimes I sing to her, and she tries to clap along." She hummed a few bars of "You Are My Sunshine," and even in sleep, Grace smiled. "And she loves peekaboo. She giggles every time." "What about you? What do you love?" The question seemed to surprise Madison. I love Grace." "Besides Grace, what did you love before all this happened?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, as if she'd forgotten there was ever a time when she could think about herself. "I loved drawing," she finally said. "Mom used to buy me these big coloring books, and I'd make up stories about the pictures." "What kind of stories?" "Princess stories, mostly. But not the regular kind where they wait to be rescued. Madison's." Eyes brightened. "My princesses were brave. They saved other people and had adventures and weren't afraid of anything." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Here was a real-life princess, braver than any fairy tale character, sitting across from him in warm clothes, holding the person she loved most in the world. "Madison, I need to ask you something important," he said. "If someone could take care of both of you, would that be better than separating?" Hope flickered in Madison's eyes before she quickly suppressed it. "People don't want two kids, especially when one of them isn't a baby anymore. Grace is little and cute. She'll find a family. Easy. What about you?" Madison shrugged with forced casualness. "I'll be okay. I'm good at taking care of myself." The resignation in her voice broke Marcus's heart. This child had already accepted that she was disposable, that her value was measured only in her ability to care for her sister. "What if I told you I think you're both worth keeping?" Madison stared at him, not daring to believe. "You mean together?" "I mean, I'm not interested in separating sisters who love each other this much." For the first time since she'd approached his table, Madison looked like the 7-year-old she was. Tears filled her eyes, and her carefully constructed adult facade crumbled. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Marcus looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her sister's arms, and then at Madison, whose bravery had shattered every wall he'd built around his heart. "I'm sure." 3 hours later, Marcus sat in his penthouse apartment, watching Madison explore the space with wide eyes, while Grace crawled across his previously pristine hardwood floors. He'd made some calls, bought emergency supplies, and arranged for his housekeeper to bring child-appropriate food and clothing first thing in the morning. "Is this really where you live?" Madison asked, running her hand along the leather sofa. "It is. What do you think?" "It's like a castle," Madison said softly, "but it seems lonely." The observation was typically insightful. Marcus had purchased this apartment for its impressive views and expensive finishes, but Madison was right. It felt more like a museum than a home. Grace had discovered his coffee table and was pulling herself up to standing, babbling happily at her reflection in the polished surface. Marcus knelt beside her, and she immediately reached for his tie. "She likes you," Madison said, settling on the floor next to them. "She's usually shy with strangers." "Maybe she knows something I don't," Marcus replied, letting Grace grab his finger with her tiny hand. "Can I ask you something?" Madison's voice was hesitant. "Anything. Why are you doing this?" "I mean, really why?" Marcus considered the question. "When I was 11, I lost my parents too. I went into foster care, bounced around different homes. Most of the families were good people, but they were strangers. I never had someone who loved me the way you love Grace." Madison processed this information seriously. "Is that why you looked sad at the restaurant?" "Partly. I've spent 20 years building a successful business, but I never built a family. I never thought I wanted one until tonight." "What about your other family? Aunts and uncles and grandparents?" "None that stayed in touch after my parents died." Marcus felt the familiar ache of old grief. I learned to be self-sufficient pretty early. Madison nodded, understanding. It's scary being alone. Yes, it is. Grace had tired of the coffee table and crawled back to Madison, who automatically lifted her sister onto her lap. The gesture was so natural, so full of love, that Marcus felt his throat tighten again. Madison, I need you to understand something, he said. What you did tonight, what you offered, it wasn't just about finding Grace a good home. You showed me what real love looks like. You reminded me that some things matter more than business deals and bank accounts. Madison studied his face with those serious blue eyes. You're not going to change your mind tomorrow, are you? No, but I need to warn you, I don't know how to be a father. I'll probably make mistakes. I don't know how to be a kid anymore, Madison admitted. I'll probably make mistakes too. Then we'll figure it out together. For the first time, Madison really smiled, and Marcus saw the carefree child she'd been before tragedy forced her to grow up too fast. Can I tell you a secret? Madison whispered. Of course. When I was watching you at the restaurant, I pretended you might be our dad. Not the kind who leaves, but the kind who stays and reads bedtime stories and remembers birthdays. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. What kind of bedtime stories do you like? The kind where families stick together no matter what. I think I can manage that. Grace chose that moment to clap her hands and babble something that sounded remarkably like Dada. Madison giggled, the first truly childlike sound Marcus had heard from her. She's trying to say your name, Madison explained. She calls everyone Dada right now. But as Marcus looked at this beautiful baby who was reaching for him with complete trust, he thought maybe Grace had it exactly right. 1 month later, Marcus stood in the doorway of what had been his home office, now converted into a cheerful nursery. Grace was taking her afternoon nap, surrounded by the stuffed animals she'd already become attached to. Madison sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, working intently on a drawing. The transformation of his apartment and his life had been swift and complete. Gone were the sterile minimalist decorations, replaced by colorful toys, finger paintings on the refrigerator, and the constant soundtrack of children's laughter and chatter. What are you drawing? Marcus asked, settling beside Madison on the carpet. It's our family, Madison said, holding up the paper. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house. A tall man in a suit, a little girl with yellow curls, and a baby with a huge smile. That's you, and that's me, and that's Grace. Marcus studied the picture, noting how Madison had drawn them all holding hands. It's perfect. I wrote our names at the bottom, Madison said proudly. She'd been working hard on her reading and writing with the tutor Marcus had hired. Marcus Madison and Grace Thompson. The casual way she'd added his last name to theirs made Marcus's chest warm. Thompson, huh? Is that okay? The lady at the adoption agency said it might take a while to make it official, but I wanted to practice writing it. The adoption process had been complex, requiring legal guardianship papers, home studies, and countless meetings with social workers. But Marcus's resources and determination had expedited things considerably. More importantly, both girls had thrived in the stable, loving environment. It's more than okay, Marcus said. I can't think of anything I'd like more. Grace stirred in her crib, making the soft sounds that meant she was waking up. Marcus went to get her, and she immediately snuggled against his shoulder, her tiny fingers tangling in his hair. Da, she said clearly, and this time there was no question who she meant. Did you hear that? Madison jumped up excitedly. She really said it. She said Daddy. Marcus felt tears threaten. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a lonely workaholic eating dinner alone. Now he was someone's daddy, someone's whole world. I heard it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The intercom buzzer sounded, and Marcus went to answer it, still holding Grace. "Mr. Thompson? There's a woman here who says she needs to speak with you about the children. She says it's urgent." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. "Send her up." Madison had gone very still, her face pale. "Is it someone from the agency?" "I don't know, sweetheart." But when the elevator opened 5 minutes later, the woman who stepped out wasn't from any agency. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with blonde hair and familiar blue eyes. Madison gasped and stepped behind Marcus. Double quotes. "Hello, Madison," the woman said. "I'm your Aunt Jessica, your mother's sister." Marcus felt the world tilt. In all the legal proceedings, no family members had come forward. Madison pressed closer to his leg, and Grace began to fuss, sensing the tension. "I've been looking for you girls for months," Jessica continued. "I just got back from overseas with my husband. We've been working with missionaries in Africa. When I heard about Sarah's death..." She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Marcus found his voice. "Where were you when Madison was living on the streets?" Jessica's face crumpled. "I didn't know. Sarah and we'd lost touch. Our parents died when we were young, and we went to different relatives. I didn't even know she had children until I tried to contact her and found out she'd passed." Madison hadn't spoken, hadn't moved from behind Marcus. Grace was crying now, picking up on the stress in the room. "I'm their family," Jessica said, her voice strengthening. "Their blood family. I've spoken with a lawyer, and I have grounds to challenge the adoption." Marcus felt his carefully constructed new world beginning to crumble, but his voice remained steady. "Madison, what do you want?" Everyone turned to look at the 7-year-old, who was clutching Marcus's jacket with white-knuckled hands. "When?" She finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I want to stay with my daddy." The legal conference room felt sterile and cold as Marcus sat across from Jessica and her attorney. Madison was at home with the nanny he'd hired, while Grace napped, peacefully, unaware that her future hung in the balance. "My clients have a strong case," Jessica's lawyer said, spreading papers across the table. "Blood relatives have priority in adoption cases, especially when the original guardianship was emergency-based." Marcus's attorney, David Chun, remained calm, but Marcus could see the concern in his eyes. "Mr. Thompson has provided excellent care for these children for 6 weeks. They're bonded to him." "6 weeks isn't a lifetime," Jessica said, her voice tight with emotion. "These girls are my family, my blood. I can give them stability, a real family with cousins and grandparents." "Where exactly?" David asked. "I understand you've been living abroad." "We're planning to return to Africa next year," Jessica admitted. "There's important work being done there." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. "So you want to take them from the only stable home they've known to drag them to another continent?" "I want to give them their heritage," Jessica shot back. "Their culture, their family history. You're a stranger who happened to buy them dinner. I'm the man who found Madison trying to trade her baby sister for food scraps," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "Where were you then?" Jessica's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked very young. "I didn't know," she whispered. "If I had known, I would have moved heaven and earth to find them." Marcus studied her face and saw genuine grief there. This wasn't about money or convenience. Jessica truly believed she was doing the right thing. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Have you spent any time with children? Do you know what Grace likes to eat, or what songs help her fall asleep? Do you know that Madison has nightmares about being separated from her sister?" "I can learn those things," Jessica said defensively. "And what about Madison's choice? She's old enough to express preferences." "She's 7 years old," Jessica's lawyer interjected. "Children her age aren't considered competent to make such decisions. This child raised a baby on the streets for..." 3 months, Marcus said. I think she's proven her competence. David cleared his throat. There might be a solution that benefits everyone. All eyes turned to him. What if we arrange for extended visitation? Jessica could spend significant time with the girls, build a relationship, and they could maintain their family connections while staying in their current stable environment. Marcus felt a glimmer of hope, but Jessica was shaking her head. I appreciate Mr. Thompson's care, she said, but these children belong with family, real family. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. After 6 weeks of bedtime stories, scraped knee bandages, and Grace's first steps taken in his direction, he was still just a stranger with money. Your Honor, David addressed the mediator, I'd like to request that we hear from Madison directly. Absolutely. Not, Jessica's lawyer said immediately. We won't subject a child to that pressure. But the mediator was nodding thoughtfully. In cases involving older children, we do sometimes consider their input. I think a brief, private conversation with Madison might be beneficial. Marcus felt his heart hammering. Everything now depended on a 7-year-old girl who'd already been through more trauma than most adults could handle. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. Something Jessica should know before any decisions are made. Everyone looked at him expectantly. Madison isn't just attached to me. She's terrified of being separated from Grace. It's the one thing. She's never gotten over from her time in the system. If you take them away from me, you need to understand Madison will see it as another abandonment. Another time when adults made decisions that tore her family apart, Jessica's face went white. I would never separate them. But you're separating them from the only father figure they've ever known, Marcus said softly. Grace calls me Daddy. Madison has been practicing writing Thompson as her last name. You may be their blood family, but I'm the family they chose. The room fell silent. Finally, Jessica spoke, her voice barely audible. I need to think about this. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her decision. In the space of one afternoon, both of their worlds had been turned upside down. But as he thought about Madison's small hand in his, and Grace's sleepy smile when he picked her up each morning, he knew one thing with absolute certainty, that he would fight for these children with everything he had. They weren't just his responsibility. Anymore, they were his heart. 2 days later, Marcus sat in his living room watching Madison color at the coffee table while Grace played with her blocks nearby. The court-appointed child advocate would arrive soon to interview Madison, and the tension in the apartment was palpable. Daddy? Madison looked up from her drawing. Will you still love me if I have to go away? Marcus's heart clenched. Madison, listen to me carefully. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever change how much I love you and Grace. You're my daughters now, no matter what happens. But what if Aunt Jessica is nice? What if she really wants us? Marcus knelt beside her chair. Then we'll figure it out together. But remember what I promised you that first night. I said we'd stick together no matter what. I meant it. Madison nodded, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. The knock at the door came precisely at 10:00 single quotes clock. Dr. Sarah Williams was a kind-looking woman in her 50s who specialized in child psychology. Marcus offered her coffee while Madison stayed close to his side, suddenly shy. Madison, I'm here to talk with you about your family, Dr. Williams said gently. There's no right or wrong answers, okay? I just want to understand how you feel. Madison glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, can you tell me about living with Mr. Thompson? He's not Mr. Thompson, Madison said firmly. He's my daddy, and it's the best place I've ever lived. What makes it the best? Madison's face lit up. He reads to us every night, and he learned how to make Grace's favorite oatmeal. And when I have bad dreams, he sits with me until I fall back asleep. And he bought me new crayons and paper so I can draw whenever I want. Dr. Williams made notes. What about before you lived here? Madison's expression darkened. Before, I was scared all the time. Scared Grace would get sick. Scared we wouldn't find food. Scared someone would take her away from me. And now? Now I'm only scared of one thing. What's that? Madison's voice dropped to a whisper. That they'll make us leave. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Grace, sensing the heavy mood, crawled over and pulled herself up on his leg. He lifted her automatically, and she immediately snuggled against his chest. Madison, do you remember your mother's sister Jessica? Dr. Williams asked. Madison shook her head. Mommy never talked about having a sister. She said we only had each other. This was news to Marcus. In all the legal documents, Jessica had claimed to be searching for her sister for years. What do you think about meeting her? Madison considered this seriously. I think if she was really our family, she would have found us before. Daddy found us in one night when I asked for help. Dr. Williams spent another hour with Madison and then interviewed Marcus separately. Finally, she asked to observe the family together during Grace's lunch and playtime. Marcus watched Dr. Williams take notes as Madison automatically cut Grace's food into tiny pieces. As Grace reached for him when she was tired, as Madison instinctively moved to catch Grace before she could fall off the couch. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Williams said as she prepared to leave, I've rarely seen such a bonded family unit. These children are clearly thriving in your care. But that doesn't guarantee anything legally, does it? Dr. Williams hesitated. Blood family. Claims are given significant weight. However, my report will emphasize the children's current stability and emotional well-being. After she left, Marcus found Madison sitting quietly by the window, still holding her crayon but not drawing. What are you thinking about, sweetheart? I'm thinking about what Mommy used to say. She said family isn't just about blood, it's about who loves you and who you love back. She said some people are born family, and some people become family. Marcus sat beside her. Your mom sounds like she was very wise. She was, and I think she would be happy that we became family. That evening, as Marcus tucked both girls into bed, Madison grabbed his hand. Daddy, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know you're the best daddy in the whole world. Marcus kissed her forehead, his heart breaking with love and fear in equal measure. You're the best daughter in the whole world, Madison Thompson. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus answered the door to find a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit. Mr. Thompson? I'm Richard Blackstone, Jessica's husband. I was hoping we could talk. Marcus invited him in, noting how Richard's eyes took in the child-proof department, the toys scattered on the floor, the family photos that had appeared on every surface. Coffee? Marcus offered, please. Richard sat heavily on the couch. I need to be honest with you about something Jessica hasn't told anyone. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. I'm listening. Jessica has been struggling with infertility for years. We've tried everything, treatments, specialists, adoption agencies. When she found out about the girls, Richard paused, running his hands through his hair. She sees this as a sign from God. She wants children, so she's trying to take mine? It's more complicated than that. Richard looked directly at Marcus. Jessica had a breakdown 3 years ago. She's better now, but she's not. She's not ready for the reality of raising 2 traumatized children. Marcus felt cold dread settle in his stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that Jessica sees these girls as the babies she never had, not as the complex children they are. She doesn't understand what Madison has been through, what it means that Grace has never known any parent but you. Then why are you supporting her legal claim? Richard's face crumpled. Because I love my wife, and I've watched her grieve for children we'll never have. But after seeing this place, seeing how those children look when they talk about you, he shook his head. I can't be part of destroying a family that's already formed. At that moment, Madison appeared in the hallway, having clearly been listening. She approached Richard with the serious expression that broke Marcus's heart every time he saw it. Are you the man married to the lady who says she's our aunt? Yes, sweetheart, I am. Madison studied his face carefully. Do you have kids? No, we don't. Do you know how to take care of babies? Because Grace gets scared if you don't hold her. Right, and she only likes certain songs, and she can't eat strawberries because they make her get red spots. Richard looked at this 7-year-old conducting an interview with the gravity of a judge. I don't know those things. Daddy knows all of them, Madison said simply. He learned because he loves us. Grace chose that moment to toddle into the room, immediately making a beeline for Marcus. Da, she said clearly, holding up her arms. Richard watched as Marcus scooped up Grace, as she settled against him with complete trust, as Madison automatically moved to Marcus's other side. The picture of family they made was undeniable. Mr. Thompson, Richard said quietly, I'm going to talk to Jessica. This isn't right. But before he could say more, the intercom buzzed. Jessica's voice came through, tight with anger. Richard, are you in there? What are you doing? Marcus buzzed her up, and within minutes she was in his apartment, her face flushed with fury. How dare you try to turn my husband against me? She demanded. Jessica, Richard said gently, look at them. Really look. Jessica's gaze moved over. The family seen Marcus holding Grace. Madison pressed against his side, the love evident in every gesture. They're not your children, she said, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. Actually, said a new voice from the doorway, we need to talk about that. Everyone turned to see Dr. Williams standing in the entrance, flanked by 2 other official-looking people. I'm sorry to interrupt, she continued, but some information has come to light that changes everything. Marcus felt the world tilt. What information? Dr. Williams looked directly at Jessica. We've been investigating your family claims, Ms. Henderson, and we've discovered that Sarah Patterson had no living relatives. Her sister Jessica died in a car accident 15 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's face went white, then red, then white again. That's impossible, she whispered. I'm afraid we're going to need to see some identification, one of the other officials said. And we'll need to discuss who you really are and why you're claiming to be related to these children. The woman, who called herself Jessica Henderson, sat in the police station interview room, her hands shaking as she stared at the table. Marcus watched through the one-way glass. Grace asleep in his arms, Madison pressed against his side. Detective Rivera had explained that the woman's real name was Jennifer Walsh, and she had a history of attempting to claim children from grieving families. She'd apparently been monitoring obituaries and social services reports, looking for vulnerable children. But she knew things, Marcus said, still struggling to process the revelation. She knew their mother's name, details about their lives. Information that was in the newspaper obituary and shelter records, Detective Rivera explained. She's very good at research. Madison tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Does this mean she's not really our aunt? No, sweetheart. She's not related to you at all. Madison was quiet for a moment, processing this. So we can stay with you? Yes, Marcus said, his voice thick with relief. We can stay together. But Madison didn't look relieved. She looked confused and hurt. Why would someone lie about being our family? She asked. Marcus knelt down to her level, still holding Grace. Some people are hurting so much that they make bad choices. This lady wanted children so badly that she convinced herself you belonged to her. But we don't belong to anyone, Madison said firmly. We're a family. Families choose each other. Through the glass, they could see Jennifer Walsh crying, Richard beside her looking devastated. Marcus felt a wave of pity for them. Their pain was real, even if their actions were wrong. "Mr. Thompson?" Detective Rivera approached. "We need to complete some paperwork, but you're free to take the children home. The legal challenges to your adoption have been dismissed." As they prepared to leave, Richard appeared in the hallway. His face was haggard, aged years in the past few hours. "Mr. Thompson, I owe you an apology. I knew Jennifer had been obsessing over children, but I never imagined she would go this far. Is she going to be okay?" Madison asked, surprising all the adults with her concern. Richard looked down at this remarkable child, who was worried about someone who had tried to tear her family apart. "I hope so, sweetheart. She's going to get help." "Good," Madison said simply. "Everyone deserves help when they're sad." In the car on the way home, Grace babbled happily in her car seat while Madison stared out the window. "Daddy?" she said finally. "Yes." "Sweetheart, I'm glad she wasn't really our aunt." "Why?" Madison turned to look at him with those wise blue eyes. "Because if she was real family, and she didn't want us before, that would mean we weren't wanting. But she was just a stranger who was confused. That's different." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Even after everything she'd been through, Madison was still protecting her heart, still finding ways to believe she was worthy of love. "Madison, I need you to understand something very important. You and Grace have always been worth wanting. Always. The fact that some people couldn't. See, that doesn't change your value. It changes theirs." Madison smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her in days. "I know that now, because you saw it right away." That evening, as Marcus read bedtime stories to both girls, Madison interrupted him mid-sentence. "Daddy, can we have a party?" "What kind of party?" We're really a family party, with cake and balloons and everything." Marcus looked at his daughters, because that's what they were, legally and emotionally, and in every way that mattered, and felt his heart overflow. "I think that's the best idea you've ever had." Grace clapped her hands as if she understood, and Madison giggled. And Marcus knew that this moment, this perfect, chaotic, love-filled moment, was what family really meant. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of their new house, watching through the window as Madison pushed Grace on the swing set he'd installed in their backyard. The penthouse apartment had been beautiful, but it wasn't a place where children could run and play and be loud. This house was different. It had a big yard, a playroom, and most importantly, it felt like home from the moment they'd walked through. The front door. "Higher, Maddie," Grace squealed, her vocabulary expanding daily. "Hold on tight." Madison called back, her face bright with joy. The adoption had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Madison Thompson and Grace Thompson were officially his daughters, and he was officially their father. They'd celebrated with the promised party, complete with a cake that said, "The Thompson family in purple frosting." His phone rang, interrupting his peaceful morning observations. "Marcus, it's Dr. Williams. I have some news I thought you'd want to hear." "About Jennifer Walsh?" "Yes, she's been getting treatment, and she wanted me to pass along a message. She asked me to tell you that she's sorry, and that she hopes your family is happy." Marcus watched Madison carefully push Grace just high enough to be fun, but not scary. "How is she doing?" "Better. She and her husband are considering adoption through proper channels now. I think this experience, painful as it was, helped her understand what family really means." After hanging up, Marcus went outside to join his daughters. Grace immediately reached for him, and he lifted her from the swing. "Dada swing too?" she demanded. "I don't think Daddy fits on the swing, Gracie." Madison laughed. "That's what you think," Marcus said, settling Grace on his lap and squeezing onto the swing. Madison dissolved into giggles as the swing creaked ominously under their combined weight. "You're too big." Grace shrieked with delight. "You're never too big for family fun," Marcus said, making exaggerated swooshing sounds as they swung gently back and forth. Later, as they prepared lunch together, Madison suddenly grew serious. "Daddy, can I ask you something important?" "Always." "Do you ever miss your old life? Before us?" Marcus paused in cutting Grace's sandwich into triangles. It was a fair question, and Madison deserved an honest answer. "I miss some things," he said, carefully. "I miss sleeping through the night sometimes, and being able to leave the house without packing a diaper bag and eating meals while they're still hot." Madison's face fell slightly. But Marcus continued, "I don't miss being lonely. I don't miss having dinner by myself every night. I don't miss coming home to an empty apartment. And I don't miss not knowing what it feels like to love someone more than life itself." Madison brightened. "Really? Really?" The old Marcus was successful, but he wasn't happy. This Marcus, the one who gets woken up at 6 a.m. by a toddler jumping on his bed, who knows every word to every princess movie, who carries pictures of his daughters in his wallet, this Marcus is the happiest man alive. Even when Grace throws her food? As if on cue, Grace flung a piece of grape across the kitchen, giggling maniacally. "Even then," Marcus said, trying not to laugh as he retrieved the grape. That afternoon, while Grace napped, Madison worked on a surprise she'd been planning for weeks. She'd been taking art classes twice a week, and her drawings had become increasingly sophisticated. "Can I show you something?" she asked, approaching Marcus with a rolled-up paper. "Of course." Madison unrolled her latest artwork, a detailed drawing of their family, but this one was different from her earlier stick figures. This showed 3 people in a real house with a real yard, surrounded by hearts and flowers and sunshine. But what made Marcus's breath catch was the text at the bottom, written in Madison's careful 7-year-old handwriting. "My daddy saved this, and we saved him back." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. "Madison, this is beautiful. Do you think it's true, that we saved you back?" Marcus pulled her onto his lap, this wise little girl who understood things most adults missed. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved," he said. "You taught me what love really means. You showed me that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build with courage and choice and daily acts of caring." Madison snuggled against his chest. "I want to give this picture to Grace when she's older, so she'll know our story. She'll love it. And Daddy, when she asks about before, when she was a baby, will you tell her the true story?" Marcus considered this. "What parts do you think she needs to know? That her big sister loved her so much she was brave enough to ask for help. And that sometimes the best families are the ones that find each other when they need each other most. I think that's exactly what she needs to know." 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Marcus stood at the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie while chaos erupted around him. Grace had learned to climb out of her crib and had painted her face with toothpaste, while Madison sat on the bathroom counter, braiding Grace's hair with the patience of a saint. "Daddy, we're going to be late for Grace's birthday party," Madison announced. "I know, sweetheart. Almost ready." Grace's second birthday party was being held at the community center, with a dozen families from their neighborhood invited. Marcus still couldn't quite believe how their social circle had expanded. Between Madison's school friends, Grace's playgroup, and the other parents they'd met, their lives were full of the kind of community he'd never experienced. "Present time," Grace announced, clapping her toothpaste-covered hands. "After we clean your face and get dressed," Madison said, already dampening a washcloth. Marcus watched his older daughter care for her sister with the same fierce love that had brought them all together. The party was a typical toddler affair, sticky fingers, sugar-high children, and parents chasing kids who moved faster than physics should allow. But watching Grace blow out her 2 candles with Madison's help Surrounded by friends and laughter, Marcus felt a contentment he'd never imagined possible. "She's beautiful," said Janet Morrison, another parent from Grace's playgroup. "Both your girls are. You're very lucky." "I know," Marcus replied, watching Madison help Grace open presents with careful 2-year-old fingers. It must have been challenging adopting siblings, especially with Madison being older. Marcus considered how to respond. Over the months, he'd gotten various versions of this question from well-meaning people who couldn't understand how a successful bachelor had ended up with 2 young daughters. "It wasn't challenging," he said finally. "It was the easiest decision I've ever made." Janet looked surprised. "Really? When you meet your family, you know it. Age doesn't matter. Circumstances don't matter. You just know." Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Grace had crashed from her sugar high, Marcus found Madison in the playroom, organizing Grace's new toys. "You don't have to do that tonight, sweetheart." "I want to." Grace gets overwhelmed when things are too messy. Marcus sat on the floor beside her. "You take such good care of your sister." Madison paused in her organizing. "She's my best friend. She always has been, even when she was tiny." "Do you remember much from before? From when you were on your own with her?" Madison was quiet for a moment. "I remember being scared a lot. But I also remember feeling proud that I could keep her safe. And I remember the moment I saw you at that restaurant and knew you were going to be our dad. You knew right away. Not knew, but hoped knew. You had kind eyes, and you didn't look at us like we were dirty or annoying. You looked at us like we mattered." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came whenever Madison shared these insights. "You did matter. You always mattered. I know that now. But back then, I wasn't sure anyone would think 2 homeless girls mattered enough to help." Grace's sleepy voice drifted from the baby monitor. "Daddy? Maddie? Coming, Gracie," Madison called, automatically jumping up. They found Grace standing in her crib, hair messy from sleep, reaching for them both. "Bad dream," she said simply. Marcus lifted her out while Madison climbed into the rocking chair they kept in Grace's room for exactly these moments. "Want to sit with us for a while?" Madison asked. Grace nodded, and Marcus settled into the chair with both girls, Grace on his lap. And Madison curled against his side. "Tell story," Grace demanded. "What kind of story?" Marcus asked. "Our story," Madison said. "Tell her our story." And so Marcus began the tale he'd told many times now, about a brave big sister who loved her baby sister so much she was willing to do anything to keep her safe, and about a lonely man who discovered the thing he'd been missing all his life was a family to love. "And they lived happily ever after?" Grace asked sleepily. "They lived happily ever after," Marcus confirmed, looking at his daughters and knowing that some fairy tales really do come true. 2 years later, on a warm spring morning, Marcus stood in the school auditorium watching 9-year-old Madison receive an award for academic excellence. Grace, now 3 and in preschool herself, sat on his lap wearing her "Big Sister is Smart" t-shirt that she'd insisted on for the occasion. "That's my Maddie," Grace announced loudly, causing several parents to turn and smile. Madison beamed from the stage, her blonde hair shining under the lights, her confidence a far cry from the frightened child who'd approached his table 4 years ago. She'd tested into the gifted program, excelled in every subject, and had recently decided she wanted to be a pediatric doctor to help kids like Grace and me. After the ceremony, they went to their traditional celebration lunch at Romano's, the same restaurant where their story had begun. The manager, Tony, always made sure they got their special table on the patio. "The usual for the Thompson family?" Tony asked with a grin. "Actually," Madison said, "can we order lots of extra food?" "Today?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. Planning to eat everything on the menu? Madison looked suddenly serious. No, I want to have leftovers. Marcus felt his breath catch. Madison, I've been thinking about what happened to us, and about other kids who might be hungry. I want to wrap up our leftovers and give them to people who need them. Grace nodded solemnly, though she probably didn't fully understand. Share food. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. His daughter had transformed her traumatic experience into compassion for others. I think that's a beautiful idea, he said. They ordered far more than they could eat, and after lunch, Madison carefully supervised the wrapping of the leftover meals. Then they walked through downtown, Madison confidently approaching people who looked hungry and offering them food. My daddy taught me that everyone deserves help when they need it, she told an elderly woman sitting on a bench. The woman accepted the meal with tears in her eyes. Your daddy raised you right, sweetheart. Actually, Madison said with a matter-of-fact honesty that still amazed Marcus, I kind of raised myself for a while. But my daddy taught me it's okay to be happy now. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Grace insisted on calling her grandmother Marcus's former housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, who had become the grandmother the girls had never had. Grandma Chun, I gave food to hungry people today, Grace announced into the phone. While Grace chattered away, Madison approached Marcus with a wrapped package. What's this? He asked. It's Father's Day next week, but I wanted to give it to you. Now, Marcus unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound photo album. The first page showed that original stick figure drawing Madison had made of their family, now carefully preserved behind plastic. But the rest of the album was filled with photos from their 4 years together birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, family vacations, and hundreds of ordinary moments that had created their extraordinary life. On the last page, Madison had written a letter in her careful 9-year-old handwriting. Dear Daddy, 4 years ago, I thought I was just trying to save Grace. I didn't. No, I was also saving you, and that you were going to save us back. Thank you for teaching me that families can be born from love instead of just blood. Thank you for showing Grace what daddies are supposed to do. Thank you for reading us stories and bandaging our scrapes and never missing a school play or soccer game. But most of all, thank you for seeing us that night at the restaurant and knowing we were worth keeping. You're the best daddy in the world. And Grace and I are the luckiest girls ever. Love forever and ever. Madison Thompson, your daughter. Marcus couldn't speak. He pulled Madison into a fierce hug, this remarkable young woman who had started as a desperate child, offering her sister for leftovers, and had become his greatest teacher about love, courage, and family. I love you too, sweetheart, he finally managed, more than you'll ever know. Grace appeared beside them, demanding inclusion in the hug. Group hug. As Marcus held both his daughters close, he thought about that lonely man who had sat in this same restaurant 4 years ago, pushing expensive food around his plate and wondering if success was all there was to life. That man could never have imagined that the answer to his emptiness would come in the form of a 7-year-old girl brave, enough to offer everything she had for the person she loved most. Madison had been wrong about one thing in her letter. Though he hadn't saved them, they had saved him. They had shown him that love multiplies when you give it away. That family is built one day at a time through choice and commitment. And that sometimes the most broken people can create the most beautiful things when they find each other. Daddy, Madison said softly. Yes, sweetheart? Do you think other lonely people are out there, waiting for their families to find them? Marcus looked at his wise daughter, who at 9 years old understood more about love and hope than most adults ever would. I think so. And I think when they're ready, love will find a way to bring them together. Madison smiled. Good. Everyone deserves a family like ours. As they headed upstairs for bedtime stories, Grace's hand in his, and Madison chattering about her plans to start a program at school to help homeless families. Marcus silently thanked whatever force in the universe had led a desperate little girl to his table that March evening dotch she had offered him her sister for his leftovers. Instead, she had given him everything.